So the Acolyte episodes 1 and 2, I think that we could all safely agree here, are universally rejected. For the most part, the majority of the Star Wars fans that really enjoy George Lucas's overall view and overall philosophy of the franchise want nothing to do with the Acolyte series at all whatsoever after they witnessed what happened in those 2 episodes, of course, just a couple of days ago. Now, we already know that Kathleen Kennedy, leslye, headland, Amandla, Stenberg, and even the media are protecting the Acolyte at all costs and blaming the toxic side of the fandom, quote-unquote, blaming review bombing and everything else related to fake reviews, quote-unquote, as well, that have a lot to do with the reason of the Acolyte ratings disaster. And this is just pathetic in nature. It just goes to show you exactly how desperate they really are, and the fact that they put out these apparent record-breaking numbers for the Acolyte series so prematurely, even before what they did with Ahsoka, goes to show you exactly what they're trying to do. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So, we already know that Amandla Stenberg is by far one of the most insufferable actresses attached to the Star Wars brand currently, based on what she said about Star Wars fans, based on what she said about what they wanted to do with Star Wars fans, how they wanted to make them feel, and what they actually view Star Wars basically is at the end of the day. Now, what's interesting about this moving onwards has a lot to do with Kathleen Kennedy also jumping in and defending the Acolyte like there's no tomorrow. Let's get into this, shall we? Now, with those like Kathleen Kennedy and leslye Headland endlessly defending the Acolyte series, one major development now has to do with Kennedy attacking the fandom yet again after the ratings for the Acolyte is considered the worst out of all Star Wars projects by Kathleen Kennedy. Now, Kennedy delivered the following: I just think that we live in an age where authenticity is very hard to prove in a world like this, where with a franchise like Star Wars, you have that toxic side of the community that mostly consists of men that feel that this belongs to them. I would be lying if I had not seen the latest reactions and reviews of the Acolyte, but like I said before, authenticity is hard to prove. I find most of those reviews to be blown out of proportion and part of their narrative that are just not coming from a real place at all, and doesn't translate to the end product result with how it resonates with fans. The Acolyte, as far as I see it, is one of the most successful Star Wars editions yet. The critics love it, and they are supporting us all the way through for LGBTQ representation, and just how important that really is to us here at Disney. I have produced many films and series under Star Wars, and this, I will proudly say, is the first project that is really catered to women. I think it's very fair as a producer to say that those reviews that we have been getting recently are just coming from that same minority of fans that come from the toxic male demographic, that make it very hard for women in the film industry. I mean, it's just a terrible type of behavior that you just have to address, because it's unfortunate that so many believe that we are dealing with a majority of our fan base that dislikes this or that. We had a similar situation with our Last Jedi film by Rian Johnson, who did nothing but an incredible job. This era of a toxic minority, of course, creating their own narrative, that their reviews are coming from a majority of the fan base, are not just irresponsible, but very offensive to the many communities that we are trying to represent properly in the Acolyte with a successful series. Now guys, before I move on to what Kathleen Kennedy is just saying here in the most nonsense way possible, there are many members of the LGBTQ community that have been commenting here, you know, day in and day out. I have seen them, and I will address it right now, that even they are calling out Lucasfilm for their nonsense views on the Star Wars fandom, blaming fake reviews, blaming, of course, the toxic side of the fandom, quote-unquote. I mean, it's ridiculous. So the fact that you even have the LGBTQ community really calling out Lucasfilm for all of their nonsense views of how the fandom is acting is very, very revealing. Alright, so that means Lucasfilm is catering to a specific small niche for Star Wars, essentially, that is basically non-existent, that is so small to the point where it's just going to cost them in the end. Now, one thing about this is that we know that episodes 1 and 2 are just the beginning. We know that episodes 3 and 4 are going to double down on their diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, and everything else when it comes to the bad writing and the subpar narrative by Leslye Headland. Moving on. She goes on to elaborate further. Leslye knows exactly what she is doing with Star Wars and how she could adapt it to something new and for new fans. That was our goal. And this is also something that I talked over with Dave, as in Dave Filoni she's talking about, who is very passionate about Leslie's direction with the Acolyte. I just can't fathom how that side of the fandom believes what they are saying, because Star Wars has and always has been about evolution. And that's what exactly Leslye was actually aiming for and wanted to focus on to really fit this story to the modern woman. This is a woman's story after all, and it comes from a very passionate woman like Leslye, who grew up writing stories related to Star Wars before she was even in this industry, and that was their type of talent I knew we needed to grab for this series. So basically, guys, what Kathleen Kenendy is saying is that she wanted someone who was writing nonsense fan fiction. Alright, it's one thing to write fan fiction, I get that, but Leslye Headland openly revealed months ago that she and her views of fan fiction for Star Wars was all about LGBTQ. That's what it was really all about. And the fact that Leslye also said here that Dave Filoni supports all of this going in just goes to show you that he's also a part of the problem. Alright, I've always pointed this out. Dave Filoni is not the savior of Star Wars. I don't care what anyone says. I don't believe that Dave Filoni is being put under pressure to act in a certain way to get certain projects. There's no such thing. He is most certainly all in on it when it comes to Leslye Headland and Kathleen Kenendy. But moving onwards, alright? She concludes, but to have a minority of fans putting out false views of a series is just completely offensive to the creators and talent behind the show that is going to be a big deal for Lucasfilm and for the new fans just getting into Leslie's version of Star Wars. Leslye and I both agreed, and so did Amandla, that we had to cut ties with George's vision of Star Wars to really embrace something new, and I am proud to say this is the first project on our hands that shifts away from his way of filmmaking and format that was special for us to pursue. So again, I mean, you have Kathleen Kenendy openly revealing that they intentionally, deliberately, wanted to exclude George Lucas's way of filmmaking. And instead, they wanted to embrace Rian Johnson's way of filmmaking and how that was passed down to Leslye Headland. Look, guys, this is exactly why you see a lot of copy and paste scenarios from other movies in the Acolyte series. Look at it very carefully, and you guys will feel a very similar scenario to The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi was the same exact thing. Almost every single scene was a copy and paste of another movie. Alright? Same exact thing with Leslye Headland's view of the Acolyte. So it's not just about representation over storytelling and character development. It's also very bad writing, and also the pacing is just terrible, the dialogue is god-awful, everything about the Acolyte is bad. So overall, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.